Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Brandon Talbert. I'm a director at Austin Consulting. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Ferguson, and today we're going to be sharing some insights with you based on our experience in advising food companies on site selection strategy and project implementation. And we're going to be touching on a lot of different aspects of site selection, from planning to execution. So whether you're currently going through this process or thinking about a future project or maybe just curious, hopefully there's a couple nuggets that you can take away. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Review real quickly the agenda for today. We're going to start by telling you a little bit about us here at Austin and what we do and what some of the common drivers are for new food plans. We're then going to talk about site location strategy, some of the initial considerations, resource planning, developing project requirements, and then get into the site location analysis at both a macro and a micro level. And then finally finish up by talking about what it takes to finalize the process. So a little bit about us. We're a site location advisory team based in Cleveland, Ohio, and we assist clients with location analysis, site selection, incentive negotiation, and due diligence for projects throughout North America. Our group's been around for over 70 years, and in that period of time, we've completed over 1,700 site location assignments. We're also a division of the Austin Company, which you might recognize. We're a leading design, engineering, and construction company specializing in industrial facilities, and we've done extensive work in the food processing industry for companies of all sizes. You can see a short list of companies that we've helped with site location recently. So what are some common drivers for new food plants? And I'll preface this by saying that it's often a combination of things, but I want to highlight some specific drivers that we see on a regular basis. Number one being growth. Really, whether you've maxed out production capacity, maybe increasing distribution through a major wholesaler, maybe your product is going from regional distribution with Costco or Target to perhaps national distribution, and you need that capacity to support that. Launching a new product, whether it's your own branded product, private label, acquisition. There's a lot of M&A activity in the food processing industry, as you all know, and a lot of times that means taking a product perhaps from a smaller company and increasing distribution production. Modernization, replacing aging facilities, improving design. That's often tied in with automation. We're looking at maximizing production output and efficiency, utilizing good lean manufacturing practices, and minimizing labor inputs. Food safety, FSMA compliance, FSIS, HACCP. Are you looking at implementing good manufacturing practices with the new plan? Supply chain optimization, that often stems from M&A integration. Then maybe you've had a major change in your supplier network. We see that a lot with food companies, shifts in product lines over time. Or maybe it's just been a while since you've evaluated your network and it's time to take a closer look to see where there's room for optimization, whether it's consolidating or adding a new manufacturing distribution facility in a strategic location. And finally, labor market access. This has become a very big concern for many food companies we've worked with more recently, as the labor market has really tightened nationally and hit some areas of the country even harder, where you've got a competitive labor market environment. So perhaps it's not an issue of production capacity, but instead it's just that you're severely constrained by your inability to attract people. So where do we start and how do we get there? We'll talk a little bit about site location strategy. Starting with some of the key goals, and these will obviously vary from project to project, but important things that we typically see. Where can we minimize operating costs and starting costs? And how can we ensure high productivity through making sure you've got a qualified workforce, good availability of workers, and minimizing turnover? Satisfying today's operational needs while planning for future growth. So you're not just looking at this in the near term, but also potential for what could happen down the road. Minimizing risk, whether it's startup delays, operational interruptions, looking at risk of perhaps natural disasters, which we've obviously seen a lot of this year, unfortunately. Or maybe it's things like interruptions with unreliable utility service. It's also important to find a community that is a good fit for your company's culture and values. Looking at other more subjective variables like quality of life and is this a business-friendly location. And really the solution here is to find a good balance of these goals and any other goals that might be unique to your project through a detailed evaluation of location options. Now I'm going to touch on some initial considerations as you're starting the planning process. It's important to understand what's driving the project, and we talked a little bit about these in the context of what's trending right now, but it's important to note that the answer to this up front because it's going to impact the complexity of the project, the necessary resources, and perhaps the schedule. So, for example, if it's a disaster response, you need an immediate solution to the problem, perhaps to facility loss. That's going to allow much less time for analysis of location versus something like network optimization, where you might be evaluating different scenarios for consolidating operations, or new plants, new distribution centers. Also, develop a target schedule for project implementation. Some important questions to ask. Is this project addressing an immediate need, or is it positioning us for planned growth? How do competitive pressures impact the schedule? And how are we going to manage risk on an aggressive timetable? Have we started preliminary process and facility design? This can take some time for planning, and companies are often putting this off to a later time. You can really save a lot of time by starting this sooner than later, and it helps with defining the structure of the project and understanding what the requirements are going to be. How much flexibility does our schedule allow? And is the schedule reasonable? So the schedule is going to influence how much time is allowed for location analysis, and it's going to help in defining what the best strategy is. Another important question to ask up front is what issues are we facing at our current location, and how can we improve? You don't want to duplicate those issues at this new location given a blank slate. So whether it's that you're having difficulties recruiting, issues with labor relations, maybe poor proximity to customers and suppliers as your supply chain network has changed over time, or maybe it's high cost of doing business or growth constraints, just from lack of space. Who's going to manage this project for you? This is an important question up front. It's going to help bring structure to the process. It's going to require some significant time commitment. So, and also input from internal team members, from your executive team, from HR as it relates to workforce, finance, operations, logistics. So it's important to understand the time commitments and the capacity of your internal team members to focus on the project as you're thinking about what external resources you may need to engage, whether it's legal or design engineering, site selection, consulting, tax, etc. So next I'm going to talk about defining the location requirements. So these requirements will form the basis of the location analysis. So it's really important to be as accurate and specific as you can. The old adage, bad input, bad output. So this not only relates to evaluating potential sites, but also the basis of any cost modeling, any transportation cost modeling, operating costs. You're also going to want to separate requirements from preferences. What do you really need to have versus what's nice to have? You don't want to tighten the parameters too much at this point. Also, requirements for both initial and future operations. So this is important for cost modeling and ensuring that the site has adequate room, the location has adequate room for any potential future expansion. So defining that up front really helps in the evaluation process. So let me provide an illustration to kind of give you a little more of an idea of how to some of the things that you're going to want to define at this point. Starting with a new plan, looking at property specifications, things like building size, approximate dimensions, clear height, also site requirements, how much space do you need for parking, outside storage, silos, paint, room for vehicle circulation. That's going to really define the that's really going to be helpful in setting the parameters for the property search to follow. Labor profile, defining what your needs are for both salary and hourly employees. Looking at the utility requirements, electricity, gas, water, wastewater, telecommunications, and environmental impact. What emissions are going to be associated with the new plan? What type of needs do you have for solid waste disposal and other waste? Also transportation. You're going to want to understand where your raw materials are coming from, or where they could potentially come from, where you're going to be sourcing potentially packaging materials. If that's going to play a role in the location analysis, it's really looking at major inputs here. If there's any shipments coming potentially from other plants for further processing or distribution at this location, and you're going to want to look at the volume of those shipments and how the product's going to get there, whether it's going to come by ocean vessel, truck, rail, reefer, or a combination of, and ultimately what's going out. How's your product going to get to your customers, distribution centers, wholesale distributors, and other plants if applicable. So this is important, particularly for doing a thorough transportation analysis. Next, what's the search area for the new plan? So do the requirements point to a specific location where you need to be? Is it replacing a plant in an existing market? Is this going to be really driven by proximity to major customers or suppliers, or just-in-time delivery requirements? Or will you be looking at a broader geography? And this is really going to define what level of analysis you're going to need to do next. So, for example, are we going to be evaluating location options in the entire eastern U.S. or maybe the west, southwestern U.S.? What do the requirements logically point to, and how can we go ahead and start to narrow the search? And with that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Mike.
Thanks, Brandon. Now that we've identified our search area, we may still be looking at a very large geography. So now your question may be, with so many choices, where do we start? For us, we typically start with a favorable area analysis. The objective of a favorable area analysis is to identify the most favorable area, or even areas, for your new facility. And this area will be determined based on many factors such as transportation, requirements, operating costs, and other such variables. At this stage, we have a very large area, and so we begin with a macro level evaluation. To adequately cover this large area, we typically start with trial locations spread out across the search area. These trial locations are often mid-sized or larger cities. Given the large population base, these starting points are ideally located at the intersection of interstates. But we're not just looking at the city itself. We are using the city as a representation of the metropolitan area or larger area. Sometimes we may use a trial location to represent an area with about a 50-mile radius, as you see here on the map. For comparison purposes, we may want to include an existing facility location as a trial location. This will allow you to compare variables such as operating costs using the same approach. We find the favorable area analysis most useful when the search area is somewhat large, such as more than 3 to 4 states. So what is considered in a favorable area analysis? To start, transportation and supply chain. Earlier, Brandon discussed the supply chain optimization. Who are your current suppliers? Where are they located? And what will your essential commodities cost from these suppliers? Have you considered using other suppliers? In addition, where are your current customers? And where do you anticipate new customers? Or perhaps you're using a 3PL or third-party distributor. Lastly, will you need port access? How about rail access? Other important factors include the cost to operate the new facility. Another major issue many are facing today is labor. What does the labor market look like at each trial city? Now, how about state business taxes? For many of you, a new location means a new state. And with that, differences in the state's tax structure. A final consideration includes qualitative factors that may vary among regions. We'll dive into many of these topics next. Let's start with an evaluation of operating costs. Using operational requirements established during the strategy phase, we can construct a cost model to compare trial locations. These requirements may include energy usage, number of shipments, numbers of workers, such as machine operators, packers, and other positions. As I'm suggesting, we focus on the major variable costs associated with operating most facilities. This variable cost shown here typically will vary significantly among the representative trial locations. Certainly your evaluation likely won't cover all operating costs. But it is important to consider inbound and outbound transportation, labor wages and fringe benefits, and electricity and natural gas. Since this webinar is geared towards food processing, you may have noticed that we left out a couple large variables, water and wastewater. At this macro level, water and wastewater costs vary considerably at the regional level due to the many municipalities involved. This makes comparisons of regions or trial locations difficult. So instead, we'll take a close look at water and wastewater during a later stage of our site evaluation. So if we take a step back and look at the screen here, you can see the major costs in the graph. We begin to notice that trial locations will often separate themselves based on these major costs. You may notice here that Atlanta, Georgia is the cheapest option, followed closely by Greenville, South Carolina. But don't race off to Atlanta just yet. The costs you're looking at here were modeled for a unique set of operational requirements, and they probably don't match your own. Next, let's talk about your new facility's tax burden. As I mentioned earlier, if you're selecting a site in a new state, you will be facing a whole new business tax structure. Understand what the business tax rates are and any major exemptions, such as sales tax on production machinery. What impact will these have on your business? Next, let's consider property taxes. Before you start thinking about property tax statements, it's important to understand the potential tax burden of your property, particularly if your project is capital intensive. Property taxes will vary across states, but a community's tax rate that represents a regional average will give you some necessary perspective. You can expect real property such as land and buildings to be taxed. Other property such as production machinery and equipment may be taxed following a depreciation schedule. But what tax impact will you see in the first year? In some cases, machinery and equipment may be exempt from property tax altogether. The same exemptions may or may not apply to inventory. Another major issue facing industries today is the labor market. Interestingly, one of the major pitfalls we see companies make today is not carefully evaluating the labor market before site selection. The company will select a location and later find out the area has issues with high turnover that impact cost and productivity. Or perhaps the workforce in a newly selected area is able to support today's needs, but a declining workforce will constrain the company's future growth. With that in mind, how do we begin to evaluate the labor market? We can start by comparing job market metrics such as unemployment rates and participation rates. How are these rates trending over the past few years? We can examine industry strength or types among trial cities and occupation data. For example, for any specific occupation, we can compare the number of workers in communities. We can even begin to compare wages among trial cities. Information about the workforce's educational attainment can also be telling. Transferable skills. If you're looking for a material handler or machine operator, can you find these workers among other occupations which share transferable skills? Also important is, how has all this information trended over time, and what is projected for the future in these trial locations? Finally, we can look at demographic data. For example, you may want to consider age, particularly if a large segment of the population may be trending towards retirement. A final factor I'd like to discuss for the favorable area analysis are qualitative factors. You may not be able to put a number or a specific cost on these, but they are no less worthy of consideration. Things such as natural disasters. Have you considered the frequency of tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes? Will this project be your only location or one of many facilities? Your answer to this question may help determine how much risk you're willing to take on. Also, climate considerations. How would living in the snow belt affect your ability to maintain production and distribution? Do you want to be near other major employers? Are there benefits to this? Could it create competition for labor? What is the business climate like? Are you already accustomed to working with organized labor? Would you prefer to be in a right-to-work state? Will your company require training for new and existing employees or specialized education programs? And are you an international company? Are you looking for certain cultural amenities? Once we put all these factors together, we need to determine a favorable area, or again, this could be areas. Cost factors may be easiest to evaluate because we're just talking numbers. Essentially, what is the least expensive? What is the most expensive? But these numbers are important. They are your hard costs and they affect the bottom line. Following our current example, you can see an area stretching from Birmingham through Alabama and on to Greenville, exhibiting the lowest operating cost option. In this case, the selected favorable area may include a multi-city region where lower costs are geographically isolated. Or in other cases, you may find a small island where lower costs are geographically isolated. This may be considered a secondary favorable area, such as the area around Louisville, Kentucky. When all is said and done, don't forget about important qualitative factors and the labor market information. Although a location may have positive financial aspects, other flaws may limit it as part of your favorable area. So now that we've started from a large search area and narrowed it down to a much smaller favorable area, but how But this favorable area is still very sizable. So how do we find the best sites? We do this through a community and property screening. This is a micro-level evaluation. Whether we arrive at the stage through a favorable area analysis or skipped ahead because we started with a very targeted search territory, we need to begin identifying properties. These properties can be found through a number of sources. The great starting point is economic development organizations, whether at the state or regional level. Another great source is electric utility companies. If you're looking in their service territory, there's a good chance they know sites that are conveniently located adjacent to their infrastructure. Likewise, rail providers can provide similar information. This is most relevant if your inbound commodities require rail shipments. Likewise, residential real estate, commercial property listings can be found on the internet. This is particularly true if the properties are represented by real estate brokers. The largest real estate brokers will even provide this information on their websites. Similarly, many industrial developers will do the same. Now it's time to begin screening through all these properties. To do so, we begin with a desktop review. Which sites look best on paper? And since you're tech savvy, which sites look best on the computer screen? From your computer desktop, you easily pull up maps, aerial photos, and street views from just Google. Just remember not to trust everything you see here, as the information is not necessarily up to date. Also, when flipping through information provided in site brochures, remember all necessary information is not always provided. This gives you a chance to reach out and ask questions. Or, if you've already identified many other good sites, perhaps this is reason enough for you to eliminate. People often say site selection is really just site elimination. Can you find other reasons to eliminate? Maybe the land area is just too small, or the existing building does not show well and clear heights are too low, or the site is just too far from the highway. In the end, you must select the best candidates for further evaluation. The next step for community and property screening may be a site visit. This could start with visiting the site itself. You may know concerns that don't show up on paper, some things that just may not be highlighted in the property brochure. Potential development limitations can be observed immediately. Water features that limit design, such as wetlands, or exposed rock that could potentially add significant cost to site grade. You'll be able to observe site access and traffic constraints. Perhaps the road to the site has not yet been built, or the only road is a highway interchange passes over a rail line at grade, while you plan to have numerous trucks in and out of your facility each day. You see fire hydrants along the site? This is a pretty good indicator of water to the site. You see the low-hanging electric lines running to an adjacent farmhouse, but no larger power lines near the site? You really think that will be enough to power your facility? Consider the possibility to extend a power line. Also check out your neighbors. Is the proximity of residential going to be a problem? What about that nearby facility putting out significant emissions or odors? How will that affect the quality of your products? The site is in a business park. How well is it maintained? What type of industries are being targeted? And are they compatible? Next, during the site visit, it's a good idea to meet with utility providers. Confirm the presence of infrastructure to the site. Make sure the provider understands their scope and timing. If the existing infrastructure is not adequate, will they be able to resolve this issue? Ask about any planned improvements, and are they budgeted for? Also find out about the electric reliability. What is the outage history? Do they use automatic switches or manual switches in the case of an outage? Is the site very close to a substation? And how much capacity and reserve capacity is available? And how about natural gas? Verify the natural gas pressure and line size. Will it provide ample delivery volume and pressure? Will you be using lots of water? Learn about water quality, capacity, and pressure. Is the site's wastewater infrastructure adequately sized? Ask about the wastewater treatment facility. Can it accept your high DOD, TSS? And at what surcharge rates? And will you be required to pre-treat? During the site visit, you should also meet with local representatives. This may include a face-to-face with the property owner or representative. How willing to sell are they? Any specific questions about the history you'd like to ask? ED, chamber reps, government officials, they all will give you a good idea if the area is business friendly. See if the community is supportive of new and existing business. Learn about the community's planning and zoning requirements. Will you be facing a hurdle to operate at the site? Find out what is necessary for permitting. Is the permitting process streamlined? And how long will it take? Lastly, who showed up to meet you when word got out that you were visiting? This may tell you how eager the community is for your business. Next, you could conduct labor interviews. You're not talking to direct competitors, but you could get some one-on-one time with operation managers or human resource staff of local industry. A staffing agency would be another great source of information here. These folks can share some labor-related insights, such as how far employees are willing to commute, if they have trouble filling positions, and local competition for certain occupations. Perhaps they'll share that they have regular problems with turnover or substance abuse. During this time, you can ask general questions about the community to get a perception from somebody who lives and or works in the community, but who isn't there to tell it. Also, you may want to visit community college. Do they have programs relevant to your industry? Perhaps refrigeration, industrial maintenance? Have they provided direct assistance to companies such as yours needing specialized training? Are they receptive to partnering with industry to develop new coursework to aid your company? Or is their system very structured? How does the facility look? Are they investing money? Is the training equipment similar to what they'd operate in your new facility? Or is it more appropriate for the 1980s? These types of meetings often draw in workforce development representatives. Take advantage. These are another great source of information. During the site visit, you'll definitely want to tour the community. How well does it show? Look for positive signs of growth and new developments. The downtown area, whether big or small, is it vibrant? Do businesses line the streets? Is it active with people? Is it kept up? Are there any signs of safety issues? What is it like after dark? Take a look at the housing stock and rental availability. How do the schools look? A couple major questions come out of the community tour that should be answered. Would you like to have this community associated with the name of your company? And if it applies, would you or your employees want to relocate here? Lastly, a final major benefit of a site visit is to initiate incentive discussions. Programs may be available at the state and local level. What are they? What is the application process like? And if you haven't already, what do you need to do to secure an initial offer? Are discretionary incentives available? Incentives such as cash grants, land cost avoidance, particularly if the land is publicly owned. Does the road or sewer need extended to the site? May help. Let's talk about tax abatements. Can they assist with workforce training costs? A final step of community and property screening should include an estimation of site-specific costs. If you've already completed a favorable area analysis, this is the time to refine the model with site-specific data and add more variables. If you started this at the screening stage, now is the time to begin crunching numbers to compare sites. Let's start with labor. By this final step, we should have picked up a lot of new information specific to the community. We may have wage studies, labor interviews, and information from staffing companies. We can access Bureau of Labor Statistics data specific to the community or obtain third-party data. Using your project requirements, including specific occupations and staff numbers, we should be able to reasonably assess the community's labor costs and make comparisons. Utility costs are another major factor that can be refined. You now know all the specific utility providers to the site. From these providers, you can obtain costs, both one-time and operating costs. So, based on your estimated usage, what will your monthly bill look like? Is that door-to-door service, or did they forget to mention certain fees? Can they provide an example bill or cost schedule? Your wastewater may be discharged with high DOD or TSS. Based on your projections, Will surcharges be assessed? And what will these surcharges cost? We call them connection fees, we call them impact fees, or capacity fees. They may all be defined differently, but how might the municipality try to recoup some expenses by charging you to get set up? If the utility needs to get extended or upgraded, who's paying for it? Will it be you? Will it be the utility provider? Or maybe the community will pick it up? Property taxes can also be refined. Determine your annual property taxes. What are the applicable tax rates, assessment rules, and depreciation schedules? And has the community offered to abate these taxes? Other costs to calculate would include development costs. Overlooking development costs is another major mistake we commonly see among companies. This may include permitting fees, or local development fees, and impact fees. If locating to a larger city, this may be described as a traffic impact fee. Also consider site grading costs. These can vary significantly depending on soil types, topography, presence of rock, and other factors. Also consider costs for infrastructure improvements, such as roads and utilities. Consider other development costs, including the local construction labor market. What is the current demand in the area? What do supplies cost in the community? Now, factoring your site visit impressions and factoring all major cost considerations, you should be ready to select the site.
So how do we get to a decision and feel good about it? We've gone through an extensive analysis, as Mike just outlined, or maybe something similarly, and you're ready to finalize site selection. Maybe you've narrowed it down to several finalist locations. So based on all that research, how do you select an option? Is there a clear preferred option, a community and site that you feel good about, or is there more than one location that can work? What are the outstanding concerns or questions? Find out what information you need to get. You need to go back and visit the site again. You need to additional cost information. You need to do further evaluation of the labor market. What's going to help in finalizing a decision and getting all team members on board? And it can be difficult to get when you get down to the latter stages and subjective variables come into play. Getting everyone to agree on an option can be a challenge, particularly if a team member is going to be affected by this project location. Maybe they're relocating there with their family. Maybe there's a team member that has a personal connection to one of those locations. So how do you bring some structure and clarity to the process and certainly make a decision that makes the most sense for your business long term? Also start thinking about a negotiating strategy. Recommend leveraging multiple locations. So if there is a clear choice, don't demonstrate it to those you may be negotiating with. Keep in mind, keep the other options open, particularly for incentive negotiation purposes. It's often helpful to have at least two locations in different states. And then finally, have a backup plan. Sometimes things don't work out. The site has issues that you didn't anticipate. Maybe that was uncovered through your due diligence. And what's the next best choice, and keep the options open. So property negotiation, you're going to want to evaluate the ownership position. Is this a public-owned site? Is this a private-owned site? What's the seller's motivation? If it's a public-owned site, are they looking at bringing your company to the community for the jobs and investment and other benefits that you're going to provide, or is this a private landowner that doesn't seem motivated and maybe has expectations for a hefty profit? Or is there a developer involved that really just wants to build you a building and maybe pad in the cost? Important things to think about to make sure you're getting a reasonable price on the property. If the owner's reluctant to provide you an asking price, that can also be a red flag. Maybe that they're not that motivated, or maybe their expectations aren't realistic given the market and the condition of the property. And finally, any deficiencies that you can find as negotiating leverage. We've done this successfully for a lot of clients, particularly given the detailed evaluation that you've gone through, looking at particular issues at the site level. Are there portions of the site that can't be developed? Can we get an adjustment on the cost for that? If it's a building you're looking at, what improvements need to be made? Can we at least get a rough cost to use for negotiating leverage if the price is not commensurate with the property condition? Or are there deficiencies in infrastructure? The site is going to require significant upgrades in infrastructure, and the price is not reflective of that. All these are good tools for negotiating. And once you're ready, consider a letter of intent when you're ready to make an offer. This can also help serve as the framework for a purchase agreement if it gets to the next stage. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about incentive negotiation. If you haven't already secured conditional incentive offers from final states and communities, this means that they're based on the assumptions that you've provided in terms of your company and how many jobs you're going to be bringing to the community and what the schedule for those jobs and investments are. You're going to need to provide detailed information on those job commitments, wages, and investment schedule. And communities are they're often looking for other selling points to justify the incentives. The incentives continue to become more and more scrutinized. What is it that you're going to bring in terms of other value to the community? And so, for examples of that might be, is this a new facility that is really going to demonstrate a long-term commitment to the community? Are you going to be creating job opportunities for disadvantaged workers in the community? Or what opportunities might this open up for other businesses? Are there some supply chain connections, local services, ancillary value that you're going to bring can help really demonstrate your interest in the community. It shows you've taken the time to have these discussions, and that can really go a long way in getting additional support for the project, not just in terms of financial incentives, but just overall support for the project as things move forward. Also evaluating each of those incentive offers, looking at what is the true value. Are these real incentives? Are these tax credits that you're going to be able to take advantage of? Are they refundable? Are they transferable? Or are you not going to have tax liability to in all likelihood, not have tax liability to be able to fully utilize these credits? Or are these cash grants or other types of cash-oriented incentives? And what are the performance requirements for the incentive agreements? And what penalties are there for underperforming? It's very important to understand what the terms of the incentives being offered are as you compare. This will vary widely from state to state and community to community. And where's there room to negotiate? Similar to property negotiations, leveraging cost data or perceived property deficiency. Sometimes incentives are easier to get when they're offsetting a deficiency in the site. A lot of locations are willing to put money behind public infrastructure if it's something that's also going to support additional development. If there's particular concerns about the grading costs, maybe the topography of the site, you're able to get some assistance with site grading or land cost avoidance or other features. You're also going to want to do a thorough due diligence assessment, and this is something that I think is often overlooked before a final decision is made. You're going to want to get input from planning and zoning department. Understand what the process is for site plan, any zoning reviews, approvals. This can add significant time to the schedule, and especially if schedule is very important to you. You're going to want to understand how this might impact project schedule. And is this going to really play a role in where you choose to locate? Transportation department, likewise, whether there's going to be a need for any traffic impact analysis. Again, verify utility details and costs. We've said this at all stages of the analysis, but this is where you want to make sure that your assumptions are correct and you fully understand any potential issues or infrastructure requirements. Also survey, looking at where, if there's any encumbrances that affect the site in the developable area, things like easements, right-of-way, setbacks, any exceptions to ownership, like mineral rights or other title concerns. And then environmental review. Is there any potential contamination associated with the property? You're going to want to do a phase 1 environmental site assessment of these, and possibly a phase 2 if any recognized environmental conditions are identified. A geotechnical exploration study to look at soil conditions and design considerations. If there's any need to look at potential impacts to protected species or cultural resources, these can really add time, and they can also become a real headache. So understanding what the requirements are, what your tolerance for risk is of maybe uncovering something during its development, and also wetlands and streams and any other water features that may need to be avoided or and finally, contractual agreements. When you're ready to lock up the property, make sure that the terms of the purchase agreement are clearly defined and the seller's responsibilities are clearly defined, particularly if the developers agree to put in certain infrastructure to support the project. You want to make sure those terms are detailed and they're clear. Also, relating to due diligence, you're going to want to, if possible, have a due diligence or inspection period. It's common to have anywhere from 60 to 90 days. We like to consider somewhere between 90 to 120 days is ideal. This should provide you sufficient time to do your due diligence and at least identify any major concerns. And it gives you an out if there's anything that would be a deal breaker. And then finally, rein in the attorneys when necessary. I've seen this happen where you get to the final stages of negotiation and both the buyer and seller's attorney can't come to agreement on particular terms. So sometimes you have to rein those in, particularly if you're on a tight schedule. Incentive agreements. As I mentioned earlier, many incentives are performance-based, and those penalties for underperformance can vary substantially from one state to another, from potential proportional reductions in the incentives if you don't meet those jobs, investment and wage requirements to potentially fully capture. So you're going to want to understand what those terms are, where there's room to negotiate. You're going to want to make sure that those terms are fair and that they're as favorable as possible. And you may need to revise your project commitment. Sometimes this can be to your benefit. If you're looking at job and investment projections, you may want to increase those. They don't always have to be the same for every incentive agreement, depend on where the incentives are coming from. So you may want to consider increasing or reducing those commitments to make sure that you're comfortable with. But you're also going to be able to maximize the benefit of those incentives. And then finally, this is something that I think is a real challenge or something that's often overlooked by a lot of companies. You get this big incentive agreement. Maybe it's multiple incentives that are all structured differently, and you fail to meet the annual filing requirements for performance compliance. So develop a plan. Make sure you know what those requirements for filing annually, semi-annually, depending depending on how the program is structured, how the contract's structured, and monitor for any changes. Sometimes incentive programs change, and you're going to want to stay in regular contact with the state community to make sure you're aware of any changes and that you're setting deadlines. You know, people change jobs, or maybe people forget about it, and a lot of companies end up leaving a significant amount of money on the table just by ignoring the compliance requirements. So with that, we have a few moments for Q&A. I do have a question here about timing, and it relates to how much time is required to do the favorable area analysis and property screening. And that does vary from project to project. So what we typically find to do a very thorough evaluation, favorable area analysis can take anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. And then screening properties and selecting finalist locations can take another 8 to 12 weeks as well. So you're looking at somewhere between 4 to 6 months. There's a lot of room to expedite that, and it really just comes down to when we're planning for projects early on, understanding what your schedule requirements are and where we might be able to optimize the schedule and customize it to your needs. So another question, are some of your clients starting to inquire about sustainability, such as solar, and how utilities address those inquiries? That's a great question. Yeah, a lot of our clients are. We also have clients that are they have requirements that they source a certain percentage of their energy from renewable sources, whether it's at the utility provider level or maybe it's supplemented with solar or other renewable sources on site. Definitely looking at programs at the electric utility level may have for selling power back, this excess power that's produced via solar at the site. It's something that's becoming a bigger part of particularly companies that have sustainability initiatives, and for it's an important part of their company value.
Another question we have here is, I've heard that many states and areas discuss that their site is certified for food processing. What are your thoughts on that type of designation? Yeah, there are certainly a lot of sites out there that are certified. We do some of the certifications ourselves, and many other site selectors do the same process. The thing to keep in mind with certified sites is not all certified programs are the same. You need to take a close look and see actually what they're looking at and determine how satisfied you are with that information. But typically, these sites are very good sites. They're more likely to be shovel-ready and ready to go. And a lot of the information that you'll be requiring is ready for you.
Here we have another question about trial locations. How do you go about selecting trial locations? So I mentioned briefly with kind of defining requirements and developing a search area and really looking at where your customers and suppliers are located. In terms of food processing plants, that's often a major driver. Additionally, you can do some light analysis on the front end. If your staffing requirements are pretty significant, you may want to do some initial screening on labor markets to kind of define which locations are going to be thoroughly evaluated. Now, keep in mind on the examples we gave you, as Mike pointed out, we're typically looking at a regional level. For example, with an area like Atlanta or Charlotte, we're considering all that entire region. And based on the outcome of the analysis, what region of the country shows up most favorable from a cost standpoint, and some of those other non-cost factors will help you kind of refine. It's not a complete science when you get down to kind of understanding, do I need to be in the southeast, do I need to be in the Midwest, or this particular area of the Northeast? Where are operating costs minimized? That'll really help in defining where you need to start screening for potential communities and properties.
Yeah, we do have a couple more questions here. What is a good way to determine how many acres a company should purchase? This is a question we get a lot. I guess to get started, let's imagine you have about 150,000 square foot site. That's about 3.5 acres. With a building of that size, you're also going to want to consider parking, truck staging, green space, any sort of setbacks. So we'd like to double that to about 7 acres. And then to consider for any sort of expansion, we'll double that again. So you're looking at about 14, maybe 15 acres for a site.
Okay, with that, I think we're out of time. We'd like to just thank you again for joining us today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.